Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature, Back into Africa, Secluded Kenya in the Age of COVID, presented by NatHab Expedition Leader Joe Charlson. It's a pleasure to have you with us today, Joe. I'm going to hand things off to you.
Thanks so much, Kendall, and welcome everybody. Very nice to be here with you all. As Kendall had mentioned, I'm speaking to you from Nairobi, over in Kenya. It's almost 11 p.m. here, a bit of a rainy night, so I hope that my power and internet holds up for the duration of our presentation. I've just popped up a photo there of myself with my family. Actually, Atoll Pejeta, one of the places we'll be talking about on this natural habitat trip, with Sudan, who was the last male northern white rhino in the world. In the picture with me, there's my wife Gillian and son Kian. In addition to me being an expedition leader for NatHab for nearly 10 years, Gillian and I operate the company. We run the company that operates all of the natural habitat trips in Kenya and Tanzania. So we actually responsible for all of the arrangements that we'll be talking about now, and particularly those in relation to COVID. So I guess the question is, why travel to Kenya now? This photograph was taken just over a month ago, about 6 weeks ago, on a natural habitat trip that we ran, a secluded Kenya safari. To be honest, there's never been a better time and a more appealing time to visit Kenya. The tourist numbers are lower now than they have been for decades, and lower than they probably ever will be in the future. The safari that we've put together is really very off the beaten track, and in this day and age, a real sort of ultimately social distance travel experience. And the itinerary is really designed to enhance isolation, keeping away from areas where there's lots of people, and just the small group, the small bubble of our travelers together. Now you may be wondering how things have been going out here in Kenya. Obviously the entire world has been affected by COVID, but I'd like to just sort of pull up a slide now that just compares a few statistics between Kenya and the USA. Now this is correct as of the beginning of December. There's obviously quite a lot of there may well be some differences in the levels of testing and reporting between Kenya and the USA, but there is a picture that's painted here. Kenya took some very quick action at the start of COVID. We closed our international borders on the 16th of March. The whole of Nairobi was locked down from the rest of the country between the end of March and the beginning of July. We only actually reopened our international borders on the 1st of August, and anybody who's come into the country since then has had to have a COVID test before they come out. So we're really keeping an eye on what's going on. We've had guests coming through since then. Our safari properties have been open since July. We had quite a busy season through the migration through July, August and September. And we had international travelers start to join us from August. Everybody who's come in has been very impressed and sort of complimentary about the whole procedure that they've had to go through, the protocols that have been adhered to at the airports and throughout their stays. And I think that's why we find ourselves here in a slightly different situation. Just at the very bottom there, I'd like to draw your attention to the rates that in Kenya, our infection and mortality rates are 25 to 30 times less than in the US based on the testing that we have. We'll get back into some of the COVID protocols later on, but I'd like to tell you about the itinerary that we put together for you, because I think it's absolutely amazing. The Into Africa Secluded Kenya trip is basically running through what we call our green season. And we have short rains that we've just had in November, which are still going on outside now, and then long rains in April. And that brings in sort of a very lush and verdant look to the plains. It's a time when we have lots of migratory birds coming in. It's a time when we get lots of animals have been mating, and we find a lot of young calves and cubs appearing at this time. And for you all, what we've put together is a 10-day, 9-night safari that takes in 3 locations in Kenya. We have a night in Nairobi, in the Nairobi National Park, followed by 4 nights on Old Pejeta Conservancy, up in Laikipia, and then finishing off with 4 nights in the world famous Masai Mara Game Reserve. As I mentioned earlier, we've operated one of these trips already in October this year very successfully, and we've got 5 more departures running next year, from January through until June. The first stop on our safari is Nairobi National Park. Now, this is an amazing place. Nairobi is the only capital city in the world with a major national park attached to it. This contains all of the main animal species that you'd expect to see in Africa, with the exception of adult elephants. Now, most flights come into Nairobi in the evening, and as you depart the international airport, you've got about a 10 to 15-minute drive to the Nairobi National Park gate, and then you end up driving through the park at night on a bit of a night game drive, really, to get across to our lodge. Now, the lodge is called the Emakoko. It's one of our favourite places in Nairobi. It's very remote. It's not in the city at all. It's right on the edge of the park. You walk across the bridge over the river to get to it, and yeah, it's like being on safari right off the bat. There are 10 rooms in the lodge, all very nicely decked out, with a lovely veranda in the front, looking over this valley and into the national park beyond. Wonderful place to wake up in the morning on your first day in Africa, and you can hear you've heard all the animals in the night. You look out your window, there might be buffalo or hippo, might even catch a glimpse of a leopard out there in the valley, all the birds going, absolutely gorgeous. Coming back into when we arrive, you'll get in the evening. We'll organise private dining for everybody separately in their rooms, a light meal, and then the following morning we actually get everybody together with the expedition leader to do a proper welcome breakfast. In addition to the 10 rooms that there are there at the Emakoko, there's also a private house, and depending on the size of our group, we'll either have exclusive use of that house or the main areas down below. But our group will always be together, and anything we do as a group will just be for natural habitat. Now, as I mentioned, this is in the park. There are amazing animals to be seen nearby. Those who might want to get up early and have an early morning game drive might be able to find the resident leopard in the valley. But yeah, after you've had your welcome breakfast with the expedition leader and you start driving through the park towards the Wilson Airport, it is a game drive all the way. Nairobi National Park has both black and white rhinoceros in it, and it's quite common to see these on the way to the airport, along with all sorts of other games, zebras, eland, giraffes, other predators and scavengers as well. And yeah, so the first drive to the airport is a game drive. So Wilson Airport is located on the edge of the national park as well. So in this whole process of arriving at the international airport, coming through the Emakoko, it's really just been you and your group coming together, and then our guides and drivers who will be taking us through to the airport, where we get on our private charter flight. The aircraft that we use are typically Cessnas. This is a Cessna Caravan, and this is the plane we'll likely use. It's great on the dirt runways that we have out here in East Africa, and we have 3 private charter flights on this itinerary, and they all last between about 40 and 60 minutes. This is not a pressurized aircraft. You're typically flying between about 8 and 9.5, 10,000 feet above sea level, and it is a private charter. It's all exclusive to our group. So we take off from Nairobi and fly north, just crossing the equator actually, to Old Pejeta Conservancy, which is one of the most important rhinoceros conservancies in Kenya. It has the last 2 remaining northern white rhino in the world, and we'll discuss that a little bit later. 155 black rhinoceros, which is the single largest population in Kenya, and over 30 southern white rhinos. The conservancy is about 100,000 acres, straddles the equator, and is very close to Mount Kenya, which you can see there. The equator actually runs through the mountains. We'll be spending a lot of time on the conservancy, enjoying game drives, and all the main predators are there, including lions, leopards, and here we have a lazy cub resting up in a tree. We have cheetah, we have scavengers as well. The landscape there is a mix of open grassland, forest along some of the rivers, and there's also quite a big swampy area in there as well, which brings in a lot of animals to drink, to bathe, and generally enjoy themselves, as I think this little elephant has been doing. The swamp also provides fantastic bird life. This is the jacana, also known as the lilywalker, and a very unusual bird in that it's polyandrous. So a female mates with multiple males, but the males are the ones that actually end up looking after the chicks, and they dart their way across all of the little lily pads on the swamp. And we may be lucky enough to see some of these things on our way into our first accommodations. So out in the bush, we'll only be staying in our mobile tented camps. These are camps that have been put up just for our group. So the team goes ahead 2 or 3 days beforehand, sets everything up in a private campsite, and so it's only our group there. There's each of the guest tents is very comfortably decked out with either a double bed or 2 single beds. There's solar lighting in the tent. We've got all sorts of furniture, little knickknacks there, little canvas shelves to put all your belongings. There's some luggage racks off picture to the right that you can't see. And the tents are very large as well, and very, very roomy and airy. And I don't know if you can notice on those windows there that they're actually zipped, so you can open the windows up and let the breeze go through the room as well, which is very handy in airing the rooms. Tents are comfortable, and the bathrooms are located within the tents en suite, and we have proper porcelain flushing toilets, which you can see on the right there, and on the left side we have our safari shower. So there's a bucket of water, a canvas bucket of water, about 20 litres, that is hooked up on a pole at the back of the tent and then runs down into the shower, and you have a little pulley at the top there to switch it on and off. And the water is brought to your tent by your tent steward as and when you need it. So those are the actual rooms that you'll have, and then the central part of the camp, sorry, is made up of the dining and lounge tents. See where all the meals are taken and where you might spend time relaxing in camp. Here's a photograph from our safari in August. The tents are very, very big, so it's easy for people to stay spaced out when they're eating together. Oftentimes we'll do meals outside as well. Every evening we have a campfire outside the mess tent. Beautiful place just to relax, listen to the noise of the night, enjoy the stars. Absolutely beautiful. So on Arpeggiator, there are several things we're doing. I mentioned we'll be obviously doing a lot of game driving. That's the best way to see all the wildlife that is there. And one of the big attractions, however, are the northern white rhinoceros. Now, this is a subspecies of the white rhino. There are many southern white rhinoceros that are from South Africa. A lot of them have now been brought up to East Africa, to our rhino conservancies as well. Probably just under 20,000 of them in total. But there are now 2 remaining northern white rhinos. These are all individuals that have been in zoos. There was a male that you saw the photograph of at the beginning, Sudan, but sadly he passed away in March 2018. And the last 2 rhinoceros are called Fatu and Najma. They're both females. So this, doesn't bode very well for the subspecies. However, the Conservancy is trying some groundbreaking work that you may well have been reading about in the news in recent months. And they're trying in vitro fertilization and some stem cell technology as well to try and enable them to actually reproduce using some stored semen from the males that they've had in the past. A visit here is pretty amazing, especially given the gravity and somberness of where the subspecies is. Very, very interesting to speak to the keepers who look after these individuals as well. Another interesting attraction on the Old Pegerter Conservancy is the Chimpanzee Sanctuary, which is set up in conjunction with Jane Goodall. This is where chimps that have been rescued from the black market are brought and given a very large enclosure in which they can recuperate, recover, and live out as normal a life as possible. This is a problem across much of Africa, and there are 36 chimpanzees currently in the sanctuary. It's the only place in Kenya where chimps can be seen. It's temporarily closed down because of COVID, chimps being very close relatives of ours, but there is talk that it might be open soon, and hopefully in time for some of our departures. Being a conservancy rather than national park or reserve, Old Pegerter allows certain activities that can't be done elsewhere. One of these is a walking safari, where accompanied by an armed ranger, you head out across those plains, exploring the bush, and really get an opportunity to see Africa from the ground. It's very, very different being out on foot than it is in vehicles. You get to appreciate so much more the little things, the tracks, the signs, the insects, looking to see who's passed by during the night. And oftentimes you get quite close to some larger mammals as well. Never as close in a vehicle, but these buffaloes certainly interested in who's moving around there. Time to time, one of our walks might end up in a bush meal, where our staff from camp have come up to set up something for us out at a lovely site out in the bush. Also on Old Pegerter, we're allowed to conduct night game drives. This is where we use a filtered spotlight to see what nocturnal critters we can find. Yes, and it can be quite exciting. The red filter on the spotlight actually enables us to observe the animals without disturbing their behavior too much, as with this leopard here. Old Pegerter is part of the northern part of Kenya as well, and so some of the species up here are those that you won't find down in the Mara. We have a different species of giraffe, the reticulated giraffe. We have a different zebra, the grevy's, in addition to the common one. We have oryx and other species of the north. And then also unusual sightings, the likes of wild dog, which in recent years have come and denned on Old Pegerter. This particular bunch are actually eating a giraffe. We also came across in October a porcupine by daytime, which is quite interesting because we usually only see these animals at night. So I think you can see there's a lot to keep us busy here on Old Pegerter. Lots of great sightings to be had, both amongst the sort of the main big 5 animals that everybody wants to see, but also the more unusual ones. A lot of conservation work to learn about as well. And our 4 days here will certainly be quite busy. Then go to the airstrip for our next flight, which takes us down to the Masai Mara. This will be flying across the Aberdare mountain range, a very important water tower for Nairobi, across the Great Rift Valley before descending onto the plains of the Mara. Now, in the Mara, we utilize a section called the Mara Triangle. Afraid I did not have a map put up here, for which I apologize, but it's the western side of the Mara, about a third of the Mara, and where we have 5 different campsites that we utilize along the Mara River. So this is one of our favorite ones called Kiboko, which means hippopotamus in Swahili. And this campsite is absolutely lovely because it's on a great big bend in the river, and you can just see some of our tents tucked up in the trees on the other side. The camps along the river will typically overlook pods of hippos down in the water, and you hear the hippos splashing around by day and night. You hear them as they call. Their sort of laughing call vibrates and resonates along the river. The camps that we set up here, it's another mobile camp, very similar to what we'll have just come from in Olpejita. The setup is almost the same. I showed you sort of the central lounge and dining tents from the Olpejita camp. Here's another shot of what the lounge looks like here. All of our furniture here is made to be packed up and transported, because the camp only comes in for 4 nights, and then when we leave, it all gets packed up and brought back up to Nairobi. So we utilize the packing boxes for our tents and lanterns to make the sofas you can see there. All the tables and chairs all fold away so that everything can pack up into lorries and be sent back up to Nairobi. In the lounge tent here, you can see we usually serve our tea and coffees, and we also have a library and charging facilities to keep all your cameras fully charged up. And then from there, the tents run down through the trees along the edge of the river, and as I mentioned, very similar looking, slightly different decor, but the same large tents. And this will be our base in the Mara for the 4 nights that we're here. Now, the Masai Mara is probably Kenya's best known wilderness area, and probably definitely best known for the wildebeest migration. However, our safari is taking place in the green season, running now from November time through until May, early June. Migration usually arrives here in about early to mid-July, and we have a series of Kenya migration and photo safaris that run through our migration season. Not having the migration then does not mean that there is nothing to see. To be honest, I find the Mara to be a more rewarding place to visit outside of the migration season. There's a huge amount of resident game within this ecosystem, including lions like this very handsome chap. About 350 lions in the greater Mara ecosystem, and most of them are resident within pride territories. And it's really only the young males that leave the pride when they're about 2.5 years old, and will then roam and find a new area where they can challenge for their own pride away from their natal group. Obviously, as they do that, they create and they give rise to playful little cubs. These two are in the Musiara Marsh in the Mara, which is an area that we visit from our camps, and they're splashing around in the water there. And a lot of these images, which have all been sort of taken on our safaris here, you'll see that there's beautiful green grass in the background. Lions are, of course, not the only predators here. We have a healthy cheetah population, about 45 adult individuals in the Mara at any given time. And blurred off in the background there are Thompson's gazelles, which you can find within the Mara throughout the year. They're one of the species that there's a good resident population of that keeps these predators going. When you've got the predators out there, you'll also get your scavengers coming through as well. Here we've got a hyena and some vultures that have been getting busy on a zebra there. The hyenas belong into quite large clan units, but they typically spend all their time with, or the majority of their time with, a smaller group of hyenas, with females being dominant over males. Now, definitely scavenging here, but in the Mara, hyenas probably hunt and kill about 50% of what they eat. Now, we'll be doing a lot of driving over the grassland plains, through the acacia forest, looking for things like this, but we do also spend a lot of time along the Mara River and other waterways as well within the ecosystem. There's lots of permanent water here, including those substantial rivers, and it basically does provide a lifeline for the animals that are here. These elephants have been coming down for a drink. We do also have good number of crocodiles in the river. These Nile crocodiles can get to be about 15 feet long, and they do so mostly on the back of the migrating wildebeest herds that come through. So when we see crocodiles in the river, they'll likely be just waiting for the herds to come back. They can go for months without eating if they need to. Also along the rivers, you'll get lots of lovely birds as well. I mean, there's about 400 species of birds that can be seen in the Mara. And this malachite kingfisher here is one of the smallest and most colourful. So the game that's out there all the time, the animals that are never migrating away from the Mara include things like the eland here, impala as well, of which we get some quite big herds moving around on the edge of the bushline. Maasai giraffe, the southern species of giraffe that we see slowly across the plains. And then other big game like buffalo, another one of the big five. Now, whilst in the Mara, our activities will pretty much be game driving. That's really what we're permitted to do there. We will also spend some time with the Mara Conservancy rangers at their headquarters, learning about some of the work that they're doing, some of which is supported by WWF in terms of the anti-poaching that they do. But we do spend a lot of time out game driving, and because of the big distances we're able to drive, we'll often stop for picnic meals, which we set up under the shade of a tree alongside the car, wherever it is that we end up. Oftentimes at the end of the day, we're able to set sundowners somewhere and enjoy a sunset over the plains and the forests. And we have 4 days here in the Mara enjoying all of these animals and really enjoying the Mara when there are very, very few other people around, which is absolutely magical. I know that our trip there this last October, they had days when they were game driving and came across 1, 2, 3 other cars, which is just unheard of down in the Masai Mara. And as the sun sets on our safari, and it's time to head back, what we've organised is, in order to keep you away from people and out of the city, is that we have a late departure out of the Masai Mara and fly straight into the international airport, where you can link up with your flights back home. And so this, as we said, just keeps you remote, keeps you away from any urban areas. And so your entire time on safari with us in Kenya is really just within your group and then with the staff who are looking after you. So I would like to spend a little bit of time now discussing some of the COVID protocols. This is obviously something that we're all very interested in, very concerned about at the moment. And NatHab's really been making some very big efforts to ensure that we can operate these safaris and other trips in a safe manner. So we have a special team at the NatHab office that's been developing the protocols for these safaris, and what they've done is looked at COVID-19 mitigation tactics and that's been researched and recommended by the CDC, the WHO, and other expert bodies, working with other partners in adventure and outdoor travel, just to try and find out what are the best practices and developing those and sharing those, ensuring that the partners who we're working with in the field, our team out here, are properly vetted and all our staff and expedition leaders are trained. And NatHab works with United Healthcare Global. So there are doctors on standby who can conduct virtual health assessments and provide any advice that is required for guests. Guests are prepared for their safaris in advance. NatHab sends face coverings, sanitizers, proper medical masks to you before your trip to make sure you have everything you need. And then when you get here, we're always going to have a special screening process for guests and expedition leaders that includes daily temperature checks and symptom checks, just to make sure that everybody's doing well. Now, these protocols have allowed us to operate a successful trip in Kenya in October this year, and successful trips in USA as well, which we're very proud of. The measures that are being taken to mitigate the spread of COVID is really using a combination of simple interventions, which are just summarized in this picture here. These include respiratory hygiene, wearing face coverings, covering your mouth when you're coughing and sneezing, hand hygiene, washing hands frequently, avoiding touching your face, your eyes, nose, and mouth with unwashed hands, physical distancing, maintaining space between people, and then enhanced sanitization, utilization of sanitizer on yourselves, but also, the cleaning that happens to ensure that areas are properly disinfected. So these are interventions that can be applied across the aim is they should be applied across the board to any natural habitat trip. But we also have specific measures for Kenya. Now, these are based on the NatHab protocols. They're based on protocols that have been dictated to us by the government here. Protocols that we have developed based on the training that we've undergone and the training that our staff have gone through, which we did with the Red Cross Society here in Kenya. And I'll give you a little bit more information on that later on. But just to prepare yourself for the trip, anybody who's going to be coming to Kenya requires a negative PCR COVID test, which must be taken less than 96 hours before arrival. So you need to make sure you're getting the right type of test and that you're getting the results back quickly enough. An online form needs to be completed, and this gives you a QR code which you can either print off or have on your telephone to present as you arrive at the airport. When you are presenting this to the health officers, at the same time, they conduct a temperature screening on you as well, and they also register you for an online app that you'll need to that needs to be filled in every day, where you have to confirm your temperature and you have to say that you have no symptoms. And what we do is we have the expedition leader do all that on your behalf, working with the staff from the camp. Anybody arriving needs to wear face coverings, use sanitizer. And once you get through the screening, we have a meet and assist team that will find you and help you through the rest of the standard protocols that you have to go through. So customs and passport control. And then when we provide you with any documentation, we'll do this in a soft copy so as to minimize the amount of paper that's passed backwards and forwards. So this is where you'll start to come into contact with our staff. So our meet and assist team will all be wearing protective clothing. When you come out of the airport, you'll be meeting our representatives there, and also the driver guides who are going to take you through to the Emakoko. It's entirely likely that the expedition leader will be there as well, for some, if not everybody. Now, we've been able to operate safaris through our July, August, September season, which we've done for international travelers and East African residents as well. And then we've had a trip in October as well. And our staff have managed admirably through all of this. And we have had to put together some very comprehensive protocols for them. So all of our staff, before they can start working, have to go through, have to have a negative COVID test. And this COVID test has to be repeated every 3 months at least. They have to have daily temperature checks, which are recorded. And all of our staff who work in our mobile camps have their temperatures taken morning and evening. They've all been trained to undertake safer practices through the Kenya Red Cross, and this included teaching everybody about what COVID is and how it's spread, and really what they can do to protect themselves and to protect guests as well. And they will, all our staff, be wearing masks all the time. And in some cases, they'll also be using disposable gloves, particularly in food preparation, and then sometimes when dealing with crockery and cutlery as well in certain situations. Now, what's really been happening is our staff, as they go out into the field and into these remote locations, they form little bubbles amongst themselves, and that's really why we've been able to operate without any problems so far. We've not had a single member of staff test positive. But despite that, we do have isolation protocols in place for them, and we have lots of signage that they have to follow around the back of house. So that was for our staff. Now, for our guests, we also have to have some protocols in place as well. And this is very important for you to understand how you're going to feel safe when you arrive here. All of you that will be coming in will have just taken will have just had a negative COVID test less than 96 hours before coming. As you're traveling to come here, you'll be taking precautions. You'll be wearing a mask, you'll be socially distancing, you'll be sanitizing, and then when you arrive, you go through the screening at the airport and then come together. And as I mentioned before, that daily temperature screening is then reported to the Ministry of Health in their tracing app. We're going to ask everybody to hand wash and sanitize, and we're going to ensure that masks are mandatory when you're encountering anybody outside of this group bubble that will be formed. Because between our guests and the guide, as everybody comes together, having tested negative before, that is going to form a bubble together on safari. But when you encounter anybody outside of that, for example, anytime you're in a closed vehicle, when you're going through the airport, and when you're in aircraft, when you might be meeting any rangers at park gates or headquarters, we'll be asking you to wear masks. Now, one of the reasons why it's very easy for us to have people socially distance is the nature of safaris. You're spending a lot of time outdoors. You're spending a lot of time out on game drives, and this is the vehicle that you'll be in, our open game viewer vehicles. So as you can see there, you've got the guide in the front, and our expedition leader is just next to him in the front seat, and there are 3 rows of seats behind that. The car is completely open, the windscreen folds down, the air is always blowing through there, so keeping everybody, it's a very big car, so keeping a distance from everybody is also possible within that. Our protocols, though, for game drives are a maximum of 4 guests per car. And then we have the regular cleaning of the vehicle and of high touch points within the vehicle as well. We do ask that everybody brings their own binoculars and cameras, so we're not passing things back and forth, and we always have hand sanitizer available. But on our game drives, masks are not mandatory when we're just within the group together. Now, in camps, this is an image of some of the things you'll see. That rather interesting looking contraption on the left is a foot operated hand wash station. And we have these as you arrive in camp, and by the mess tent, you obviously have a hand washing basin, which is just for your use inside of your tent. As we mentioned a couple of times, your temperature will be checked quite regularly. And then we do also have some specific protocols within the camp as well. So the first time you come in, you'll have to wear a mask, you'll have to wash your hands, and then there's a temperature check. And any temperature below 37.5 degrees centigrade, which is 99.5 Fahrenheit, is deemed to be okay. We will disinfect luggage for staff to carry out to your rooms. And we have a rule that staff may not enter a guest tent when there's anybody in there. We usually have the staff through the tents quite a lot, just cleaning up all the time, making little tweaks, but we now just have a main clean in the morning and a turn down in the evening. Wherever we can serve meals outdoors, we will do that. We keep the tents open and airy, let the air go through, just so that there's always a sort of a breeze going through there. And we do also have a quarantine tent available. This is something that we have to have in place, so that should anybody start to show any symptoms, they can then stay in that tent quarantine from the rest of the group, and that's set aside from the rest of camp. It's exactly the same as the guest tents, but we just don't have as many soft furnishings. The surfaces are all such that they're easy to clean down. As of yet, we've not had to use that quarantine tent, but we do have it. One final thing I'd just like to touch on is what happens if we need to evacuate somebody. Now, in addition to the United Healthcare Group, in addition to your own insurance, when you come here, you'll also be covered by AMREF, the flying doctors that we have here. And this is a photo of their inflatable cocoon, which they can use to safely transport any guests back into Nairobi. So if somebody's showing symptoms, we check temperatures repeatedly just to make sure that we're not misdiagnosing perhaps a little bit of heat exposure or some such thing, or dehydration. But anybody who repeatedly shows any symptoms needs to be isolated in a quarantine tent, and then we seek advice from the United Healthcare Group. We have to inform the local officials as well. And then if evacuation is necessary, we can fly you back into Nairobi with the flying doctors. There are ICU beds available in 2 world-class hospitals here in Nairobi, which are called the Aga Khan and the Nairobi Hospital. And then you either have a recovery period in hospital, or the Kenya government allows for home quarantine, which we would do at a hotel, and we've arranged with the Emakoko that they would be happy to do that because their rooms are very far spread from one another. So that's a lot of detail there on the specific measures that we're taking, and we really do believe that with all of these measures in place, we are able to safely operate a safari for you in Kenya in this time of COVID. Now I say safely, and I just realized as I look at this picture of one of those female white northern white rhinoceros that she's not actually putting her horn through the side of the car. She's scratching her face and the base of her horn on the running board there. So it is safe. We do look forward to welcoming you on safari. And to what I believe will be a fantastic trip through some very, very interesting parts of our country, where you'll get to see a wide variety of wildlife in very different environments, and hopefully witness some amazing experiences with very few other people around. It's really just going to be all about you and your group, and you really won't be seeing many other people because of the places we've chosen. So I'd like to thank you all for listening, and I'm very happy to take some questions if there are any.
Oh yes, we do have questions for you, Joe. Thank you so much. I just want to remind everyone watching, if you have a question for Joe, you can submit those in your control panel under the questions field. Okay, there's a lot of questions about the trip itself, so we'll get to those first. What is the group size?
Oh, sorry, should have mentioned that. It's the maximum group size of 12, which means that if we do go up to that, we would have 3 vehicles out in the field to ensure we keep to 4 to a vehicle. Another thing that we also have with these trips is, we've done away with a single room supplement on this safari in order to allow single travelers to come and feel comfortable on their trips as well, not to have to share with any other travelers. So anybody who needs a single room can do so without having to pay any additional supplement.
Wonderful, thank you. And can you talk a little bit about average temperatures and precipitation during this trip?
Thank you, certainly. This is actually the warmer end of the year that we're coming into now. Oftentimes in the busier time, July, August, September, we do actually have quite a lot of cloud cover. I'll start with precipitation, because the short rains typically run in November. We're just catching the tail end of them now in early December, and then we also get the long rains, which come in April and into early May. We've actually avoided the long rainy period so that we can take advantage of the beautiful regrowth that comes through the rains without actually being at a time when it's likely to be a lot. It may be that we do see some rain out on safari, It can sometimes be very spectacular to see an amazing thunderstorm over the ridge on the western side of the Mara, but it also breathes life back into the terrain as well, which is lovely. But I very much doubt that we would have any sort of prolonged period of rain that would disturb a trip in any way. Temperature-wise, we would be looking at daytime temperatures of between 25 and 30 degrees centigrade, which you're going to ask me to translate into Fahrenheit, which I'll just do. And then cooler nights. All of the places we're going to be at are at slight elevation. Nairobi's at about 5,000 feet, Olpejita about 555. The Mara is just under 5,000 feet. So you get nice, pleasant, cool evenings. Mornings can sometimes be cold, especially in the open vehicles, but then it will heat up during the course of the day. Sometimes if there's a lot of heat buildup, we then get into a thunderstorm that might last for half an hour in the afternoon, but then typically will then sort of dry up again and lead to nicer weather. So in terms of packing, I know that NatHab will provide a sort of comprehensive packing list, but one does need to have something warm for the evenings. And then during the daytime, you really want to have layers that you can peel off as it gets hotter. So 25 Celsius is 77 Fahrenheit, 30 is 86.
Okay.
So that's the sort of temperature range.
Okay, great. And there are a lot of people who want to know a couple things. What vaccinations are required? And can you talk about luggage weight restrictions?
Certainly can. Vaccinations would be yellow fever, and I need to just check up on the latest on that, but that's something that the adventure specialist can help with. In terms of luggage, because we're on private charter flights, we have the ability to carry more luggage than one would normally be able to. Most of the scheduled flights in Kenya limit you to a 15-kilo bag, that's 33 kilos, but with the charter flights, we are able for guests to carry more than that. So we can essentially give guests the same as what they can carry on their international flights in.
Okay, great. So there's someone who's concerned about supply of drinking water. Is that ever a concern for you?
No, it's not a concern for us. And in terms of the supplies that go into our camps, the trucks leave Nairobi with all the equipment and all of the supplies we need for the safari. So they go out with everything that is required. So we have lots of fresh fruits and vegetables. We have our meats either in the fridge or in the freezers that we carry with us, and we carry mineral water for drinking. Within the camps, we do have water purification systems that we utilize for the cooking water and washing up water and so forth. So no, drinking water is never an issue. We've done away with all single-use plastics. In fact, they are illegal in Kenyan conservation areas, so in our national parks and conservancies. NatHab provides everybody with metal flasks, and we have refilling points inside the vehicles, inside the car, and we have ample water supply in all of the tents as well.
Great. And a couple questions about the mobile camps. Is there electricity in the tents? And also, can you explain the flush toilet? Does that mean like a compost toilet?
That's okay. In the mobile camp, there is electricity. So we have two systems running. All of the tents have a separate solar system that provides lighting for the tents. And then we have a generator system that is run usually when guests are out of camp that powers our fridges and freezers. But we also run at times when guests are in camp in order that people can can charge up their cameras, their phones, their computers, whatever it is they may need. Our vehicles all have inverters as well, and so we can provide 240-volt power in the vehicles as well. In terms of if there is a special need for power going into a tent, then we have been able to do this in the past, but we need to have obviously prior warning of this, so we can just put the arrangement in place. This can be perhaps for a CPAP machine or some such thing, although nowadays we've seen a lot of guests traveling with battery powered ones, and there's ample charging to charge up those batteries during the course of the day, so they're fully charged again by the evening. In regards to the plumbing situation, the toilet is a proper porcelain toilet, as you would all recognize. So there's no running water to the tents, in that we don't have pipe water in there, but we do have a large water bladder that hangs off the side of about 60 litres that gets filled up on a regular basis by our staff. That feeds into the cistern of the toilet, and then the waste is flushed out down into a pit at the back of the camp. We don't use any chemicals in the toilet or anything like that. And because we're only there for a few days, we cover that over and let nature take its course. So yes, the toilets are designed to fold and pack up, as is everything in our mobile camp, but it is very much a toilet that you would all recognize.
That's amazing. So there's a few questions. I'm going to end on these three about things you might see on your drive and experience on your drive. The first one is, how long are the individual drives, and are there restrooms available during the drives? And when's the best time of year to see baby wildlife and wild dogs?
Okay, the length of game drives will really depend on the expedition leader and what he'd like to schedule. A typical day, though, would involve an early morning wake up with tea or coffee available, some light snacks just to get you going, hopping straight in the cars to take advantage of that dawn time, which is usually very good for finding things going on, usually when the predators are still active from the night. And so we head out on the game drive. The distance you travel really depends on what you're spotting along the way, but typically we go for a couple of hours from, say, 6 o'clock in the morning till about 8:30, and then we carry a picnic breakfast in the car with us, and so we can pull up under a tree somewhere, have a breakfast that's been freshly prepared for us that morning. There'll always be some fruits, some cereals, usually some sort of cooked breakfast as well, whether it's bacon and egg sandwiches or Scotch eggs or boiled eggs, pancakes, muffins, cinnamon rolls, usually more than enough, always more than enough food for everybody. And then that's also a good opportunity to maybe layer down a little bit, start getting some sunscreen on before carrying on for a bit of a drive and getting back into camp late morning. Our days in Arpeggiata will typically be a bit shorter than in the Mara, because you would generally just drive further afield in the Mara. A lunch in camp, a bit of a siesta time in the afternoon whilst it's hotter, and then heading out again in the afternoon, either to explore a new area or to go back and revisit something that you saw during the day. On Arpeggiata, there are other activities that we'll specifically go out and do. So visiting the rhino, the northern white rhinoceroses, the chimpanzees. Instead of doing a game drive, actually heading out on a bushwalk in the morning. And those walks could last 3 hours. Maybe heading out a little bit later on in the afternoon, stopping somewhere for sundowners, or just staying with a sighting as it gets dark before using a spotlight to come back in. In terms of restrooms, in Arpeggiata, some of the centres, like where the rhinos are, there is a restroom there. But typically, no, there are not restrooms just out there in the bush. We do carry a folding toilet seat with us that the guides can set up, It just takes a few minutes, and we will do that when we stop for meals. And that'll be tucked away behind a bush or a tree somewhere so that folks can use that. And then out here in Africa, every bush can become a toilet as well. So those who feel comfortable and who are able to do that can just nip off behind those. Whereas those who, perhaps need a toilet seat to over an earth flush toilet, then we can set that up. And our expedition leaders, will ensure that they're chatting to the guests to make sure that they, understand everybody's needs and make sure that we have it provided. So there's no need to worry about not being able to go to the toilet at any stage. Moving on to the questions about sightings. In East Africa, we have 2 rainy seasons during the year. And there's typically a little bit of rain in almost every month as well. So we don't have quite the same seasonality as you'd expect to see down in Southern Africa, where everything is based around a single rainy season. But typically during this period, from November through to May, there is a good chance of seeing calves, fawns, cubs, pups, and we'll really just be getting out there to explore to see what we can find out there. There isn't a single time that's best for finding these animals. In terms of the wild dogs, wild dogs do also move through the Masai Mara from time to time as well. If they're not denning, they can range over massive areas. Where you see them on one day, the next day they might be 30-40 kilometers away. They can move outside of Alpejita and do that. There are wildlife corridors to allow all of these animals, including elephants, but except rhinos, to travel over a much wider area. So again, it's very difficult to give a time when they can be seen. I would say that we certainly don't see wild dog on every trip. About a little over a year ago, they were pretty common on Alpejita. They have been less so recently. The guys that were there in October didn't see any. So it's very much sort of a case of luck as to whether or not you do see them. But the other main species, the big 5, your rhino, elephant, buffalo, lion, leopard, you've got very good chances of seeing all of those. One would expect to see all of those species. Perhaps also cheetah, all of the main plains game, lots of the main bird species you would expect to be seeing all the time. As I've mentioned, a lot of people think of the Masai Mara only being good during the migration, but I actually find it to be much more rewarding outside of that time. You don't have quite the same densities of wildlife, out there because the wildebeest herds are not there. But what I find is that when you do find an animal, there's again fewer vehicles around, and you get probably longer and more rewarding interactions with them. And that's especially amazing if you come across a pride of lions that you can repeatedly visit over 3 or 4 days. If you find a cheetah that's looking hungry and you can go past where she's moving and where she's likely to go and hunt, then you've got a good chance of catching that. Over in the end, the more time you spend out in the field, the more likely you are to see something.
All right, great. Well, Joe, it was so exciting to hear about travel again. I know it's getting my travel juices flowing, so thank you so much. And I really do appreciate you staying up late. I know it's very late for you, so thank you again for presenting. I'm going to hand it back over to you for closing comments.
Yeah, just like to say thank you to everybody for listening. We look forward to seeing you out here. It's been a very, very strange year for all of us, but out here in Africa, the animals are all still here. It's an amazing time to come out, an amazing opportunity. I know everybody is keen to travel if they feel they can do so safely, and we feel we're in a position to be able to provide that. And so we look forward to seeing you out here on our secluded Kenya trip in the coming months.
Great. Thanks again, Joe. And my thanks as well to everyone who tuned in today. Be sure to join us tomorrow for our next Daily Dose of Nature. We did record today's presentation, so we'll have the replay available on our website soon. And with that, I'll conclude the webinar. Goodbye, everybody. Good night, Joe.
Good night. Goodbye.